Hey,
Michelle,
I'm Forrest.
and we're Tropico Photo. We're a photography and art direction team based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And today we're going to share a little bit with you about how we stage photo shoots at home. We make all sorts of different types of work, mainly in the advertising field, but we also love to shoot things just for ourselves, to create art, and to make sure that we're keeping our creativity flowing, especially during a time like right now, where during quarantine, there are a lot of restrictions on what we can shoot in studio and how many people we can work with and that sort of thing. So we've gotten really resourceful.
And we like to shoot with full frame cameras and shoot in studio. However, sometimes we like to just use an iPhone for ease of use and for lower profile. So today we're going to show you just the ideas behind setting up a creative shoot in our home, going through and selecting props and wardrobe, and then actually doing the shoot and then selecting our favorite images and then editing on the phone.
Yeah, so right now we're showing some of our ad work that we've done for various clients over the last couple of years. We love to make sure that our color stories are really strong and consistent, and that's something that we'll touch on a little bit today. We are in our home right now, which we have decorated very much in the style of our photography and our work. And that has really paid off, especially during this time, because we are able to shoot around the house. We actually shot an ad campaign here last month, and it's just been amazing to find new little corners of the house constantly that we're able to be creative within and set up shoots in. And one nice thing about when you're trying to shoot at home is like taking a moment to try to see your space with new eyes, like looking around, and instead of being like, oh, that's over my living room where my couch is, and that's not a very exciting spot. I think it's important to look around and think about how you could reappropriate spaces, how you could bring the figure into them to try new things, and consider the light in the different locations that you're thinking about around your house, because it can be so important to stay creative even though you can't go out and about at certain times. And I also think it's kind of fun and makes you more appreciative of the place that you live in. Yeah, so
Totally.
today we're going to be showing you a little shoot that we're going to do actually right behind us. And so we have a lot of colorful walls throughout our condo, and this is one that we really like to shoot on. Usually Forrest's workstation is here, but we've moved it today so that we can have this totally open. And we're going to use me as the model, which we use for a lot of our shoots right now because we can't be working with other people. And we're going to start by showing you the mood board that we put together for what we're going to cover today, and talk a little bit about first getting that inspiration beyond just looking around your space and figuring out what you want to do, but then also pulling from other artists that inspire you and putting together something that can give you extra inspiration about what you'd like to create. So so this is the mood board that we put together for today, and we want to talk a little bit about how mood boarding works for us. And one of these is our image, the one on the blue and pink with me kind of falling backwards. We will include images of our own in mood boards if there's something specific that we liked about it and would like to try again or expand on. Sometimes we'll mood board for a general look, but at this point we have a really honed in look and feel that we like to use for our imagery. So this mood board specifically is more about the movement and feeling of an image. So what all of these sort of have in common is this use of the figure to activate a space that maybe is a little bit simple on its own. And so we go through and usually use Pinterest to put together images that we like, and then compile them this way so that we can reflect on that as we're moving into our pre-production for the shoot.
And this is a big part of our job. When we're working on a creative ad job, we need to pitch the client our ideas, and having visual examples of what we're thinking is crucial so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, because it's especially us being a partnership, you realize that you're going to need tools to be able to communicate visual ideas without it just being verbal, because obviously that can be kind of frustrating for both people to be able to understand if you're not giving a visual aid for something that is going to be about visuals. And so when we're looking at all of these, we're thinking about that movement, we're thinking about a single figure activating a space, and we're also liking the way that the clothing is sort of coordinating with some bit of the space and pulling that in as inspiration. So this will be our starting point as we put this together. And as far as compiling the images on Pinterest, you know, as we see things we like on people's websites, on Instagram, I make sure to pin those things as I see them over time so that I have a large library of images to work with when we're trying to put together inspiration for photo shoots. So that's where all of these different images came from. And Pinterest is a great tool because as you compile images, it does a great job of giving you recommendations for things that are going to have that look, feel, something that ties them together stylistically.
And as you'll see, once we start shooting, things that what we're shooting share with that mood board are flatness of space and figural engagement with that flatness of space, as well as showcasing clothes and the model in general.
Yeah. And so now we're going to go into talking a little bit about wardrobe selection, because that obviously has a big role to play if you're shooting at home, especially because you'll most likely be pulling from your own wardrobe. And so when we purchase clothing, we definitely think about how it's going to photograph, because in our field, even when we're on larger ad jobs, you wouldn't believe how many times we end up pulling something from one of our own closets that's maybe a really special piece or has a great color story that's going to complement that set. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what we went through in our thought process on selecting the wardrobe today. And spoiler alert, we end up using what I'm wearing right now. So I'm going to... Okay. So whenever we're thinking about what we want to put together for a shoot, whenever we're thinking about what we want for the wardrobe in a shoot, it can be a little bit complicated to think through, because while it might sound simple, it really ends up determining the look and feel of an image. And so there's kind of this outfit, and these two are going to kind of represent the three options I usually think through for every single photo shoot that we do. So option one is this one, which is where I'm playing with pattern. I'm considering this one because it like matches our background so well. And that's when we're thinking through the monochrome option. So very often it's nice to play a color off the exact same color. And same thing here, putting it with this, it would be, you know, something that's monochrome, but plays with patterns so we get a little contrast. And that's one option that I always consider. And then the next one is like something like this. And this one is like when we're thinking about something that's going to pop off really strongly from the color. So the red obviously would be a ton of contrast off the yellow. And then putting it with this, which is, you know, similarly red. And I do like to stick for outfits for our photo shoots with either an outfit that's entirely one color or that has two really strong colors playing off of each other. But I don't like us to get mixed up too much in patterns unless they're bold, like this stripe, or like with this, where there's really large shapes that you can make out. And so similarly with the dress that I'm wearing right now, the polka dots are going to be really graphic. So think about that when you're picking wardrobe for your shots. Basically, you know, the color story, how they go together, how they're going to either pop off or blend into your set, and then really emphasizing graphic prints. So polka dots always show off well. I love the combination of black and white. And then here, because we are working with such a large portion of white on this, we are sort of doing a little bit of a coordination thing. And that's kind of the third option, which is to pull in a color from the set that maybe doesn't feel like the most dominant or strong color, but is going to coordinate and tell a nice story. So sometimes it kind of just depends on your mood, but the other thing I like to think a lot about is the movement of the piece and how it's going to allow the model or yourself to pose as you're in the shot. And so for this one, part of my decision on the dress also ended up being that I have the image of kind of it billowing out, of being able to play with like making it really big and making it its own geometric shape. And this is the only piece that was going to allow me that opportunity in this scene. So all of those good things to keep in mind as you're selecting your wardrobe and thinking about the flow of the clothing. Even the fabric can make a difference because fabric's going to photograph differently. Some fabrics are going to reflect the light more, and some fabrics are going to kind of absorb it. So another option you have is to sort of try things in the space. Like sometimes I'll literally just hold things in and we'll take like a test shot with them so that we can see how's the fabric reading, how is it looking in application, because sometimes something sounds like a great option, but like don't get married to it too early on when you need to maybe be open to changing it later.
I think other than the color, compositionally, the thing that attracted us the most was the graphic silhouette.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're gonna take this out and then we're just gonna talk a little bit about the props that we end up using here and how we want to engage the space beyond just it being a flat wall. So, because we're working from our houses, similarly to when you start thinking about shooting in your own space, it's great to just look around and kind of rethink things that you have around. You know, like something that maybe is like a plant holder or a plant stand can become a structural object, or a lot of people have plants in their house, that's great. We moved this piece of art, it's usually a little bit higher up than over here, but we really liked it here for this shot. So move things around, you know, like play with the art that you have in your home and, you know, get a sense of how that could work. So this is like a plant stand that we usually have out on our porch. And we were looking at this and we were like, well, that's really structural and it's super fun. So we thought that would be great. And we went with, you know, this option of clothing to go with kind of the white portion, but we still want that pop of red. So for instance, if I picked one of the other clothing items, we maybe wouldn't have used this if I was wearing all red. You know, the props that you choose play off of your wardrobe. So think about that as you're selecting things from around your house. But yeah, we moved this piece and then we thought about.
Just a second. Also, once we start shooting, you'll see, but we have a cement floor and we wanted to be able to crop that out of the image in camera to make it just filled with the yellow and white color block effect. So by putting the stand here and having Michelle stand on it, we're able to crop out the cement floor, which we felt like increased the minimal nature of the image.
Yeah, and that's another good point is that when you're shooting around your house, thinking about how you could elevate yourself, especially if you have like carpet or wood floors, like since you're not in a studio and a lot of our images are done in studio, part of using your space is thinking about how you can transform it to feel like something more that you wouldn't maybe constructed. And so that could even be like putting a rug, moving a rug to over here if it feels like it goes with the image, but like just thinking about how you can move things in your space to create a more surrealistic vibe and less of like a home vibe if that's what you're looking for. And so this is a plant that we usually have out on the porch with a pot that I painted, and this color palette works great with this set, so we grabbed this to use as something to potentially obscure my face, because we do like to play with obscuring the identity of models and images because it adds a little bit more of an artistic flair. And also when we're shooting with me so often and we want to kind of take away from the identity, it's nice to play with obscuring a face. And if you're using yourself over and over, then it kind of gets rid of that feeling of identifying you and makes it more like a universal person. Also,
when we're trying to do something that is a piece of art, if we found that if we take out the identity, it becomes less of a portrait because there's so much association with people's faces in photography being portraits and being about that person. We remove that identity and it becomes more about everything else that's going on, the colors, the composition. Yeah. Cool, so then once we've kind of put together what our location is, our props, chosen our wardrobe, then we like to play around a little bit with
how we use all of those things to create the shot. Because even though you have the base idea, we have the mood board, it's still, it's hard to know right off the bat when you're trying to use a new space what will end up translating the most to what you're wanting. So we'll come in with an idea, but then we'll work all around that and just try different things. It's important to play, even if you feel silly. We like to just like do some wild different things and see what it yields, because sometimes while we're doing that time of playing around is when we end up getting the image that we're most excited about. And so these are some images that we've shot in our home. And this is using all different parts of our condo. You know, like we live in a one-room condo. It's not big, but we love to rethink each of the areas and think about how the color story can change. The time of day changes the feeling, you know, 1,000 different angles to play with and try. So we like to get a little bit wild and just, you know, say, okay, let's try this. This is actually not working, you know, and feel free to like bend and cover your face and try all sorts of different stuff. So we're gonna kind of run you through in this scenario our steps to get to the final image that we will choose.
And like Michelle's saying, we really like to experiment with lots of different poses, lots of different ideas. We'll run through all of our props, and then a big part of our work is the selection process that happens at the end, where we go through and we figure out what works the best, and that's the one that we pick and edit, and being very selective about what works the best, but also, you know, what message you're trying to portray and how on brand the image is essential for maintaining a streamlined aesthetic and staying consistent through your work.
Cool. So we're just going to kind of run you through the different things that we try here, as far as my poses, as far as where Forrest is capturing from, the angles that he's using, and the direction of the light. He'll talk a little bit about as we go through here. But we wanted to keep this in, but anything that's in the frame, we want to have like a real purpose. So first we're just going to play around with, I'm going to get up on this pedestal point, and we'll run through some fun poses and show you how we're kind of utilizing this, and then we'll try using a couple of the other props that we have. Sure. One thing about shooting in your house also is you have to be conscious of the fact that you're using items around that maybe aren't built to be props. So this, it's hollow in the middle, so you've got to be careful about where your feet are, but use those things as prompts to play with. So when I say that this is hollow, it means that more of my weight needs to be on the outside. So that prompted us to have my feet turned like this, which can be really graphic. And so playing with this point, I was like, with the dress, we want it to feel big. So I'm opening my knees up and making the dress as large as it can feel, which is a really graphic element to play with. And then we love to incorporate the different props. So using my arm to kind of mirror the angle at the bottom of this painting can add something. And then here we'll run through playing with obscuring the face, playing with moving my arms to all different positions, and trying those out and just sort of running through and not being afraid to try different things. Sometimes we'll bend over. And this might be a good time for us to note like the differences in lighting.
So right now, we have a big banquet windows over here, so we're getting a pretty strong side light. We're really just trying to utilize the natural light that we have available at our condo. If we were to put that light source behind us, it would be less like a side light and more like a flat light. So, for example, I could come more from this direction, and now I'm not seeing the shadows behind Michelle nearly as much. But when I come more from the frontal direction, you get that strong light on the left and then the shadow on the right.
And that's one thing to think about when you're shooting with an iPhone, is that in studio we shoot with strobes, but at home we always use natural light because that's going to be the simplest for shooting with the iPhone, unless you're going to set up continuous lighting, which can sometimes be difficult. So make sure you think through when you find the area of your house, what time of day would be the best time, because the light will obviously change drastically if you're using window light. And so for us, we were thinking about how earlier in the day is better for this. The light gets dim in here as it gets later. And then this side lighting is great because it gives us a really contrasty look, which is part of our style and that we really like to utilize.
Another thing to think about is the direction of the windows. Our windows point north, so we actually never get direct light into our space. Direct light can sometimes be too strong for the sensor and it will read really, really contrasty or just kind of too harsh and unpleasing, particularly on people's faces. So thinking about which direction your window is pointing if you're going to utilize window light is pretty crucial. And north light is a good bet because you'll get a bright light source that's indirect all the time. So it ends up reading as diffused and soft and pretty pleasing. So it's the simplest option. Otherwise, you need to calculate for the direct light and which direction it's going, because, for example, if you're facing, the way that the sun rises, you're going to get that light until the sun passes that point in the window, and then it'll be in the shade. So you have to think about those kinds of things.
Yeah. So then back to kind of posing and trying out these different positions. We'll do little things that can make a big difference to sort of make or break an image. And so the type of imagery that we like to make, which is definitely a little bit about perfection of images, about getting really graphic lines, shapes. Little things like if my feet are further out versus in here. Like if my feet are pointing this direction and we start that way, we'll look and say, well, what if your feet are turned out? And in this case, I kind of have to because of the props that we're using, but also then that creates a way more graphic image, because as many points as you can make that are clear, I think the better. Same thing with this. It's like if we initially have me standing, the dress is kind of just falling straight, which is fun, but how much more fun is it when we create more of a shape, when it's making things like extra pronounced and thinking about how to play into that. Same thing here where, I could just kind of have my hand resting this way, but then we like to play into making it kind of as intentional and strong of a pose as possible. So then we'll play with for things like that. And it's good to make little adjustments, like maybe we start like this, hold the hand down, what happens if we see the eyes here? And then like playing with what happens if we flip the hand. That sort of thing really adds to it and makes it a more exciting image. Okay, so then we've run through what we're going to try here, but then our thought is, this is great, but let's see what it would be like to have some without it.
If you want to stay up there, I can take your time.
Yeah. So that we then, well, that is now.
They've never seen that.
I think it's that.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize she was looking at the screen.
Yeah, it looked cool. Okay. So, whenever we take this away, the way that we're going to be focusing on this space is going to be different. Mainly because before we're working with a composition that is about balancing with the painting that was here. So then that's like more of a 2/3 composition, where we're viewing this kind of as a third, we're viewing that as a third, and we're viewing my motion as another part. Once we simplify what's going on here by removing that painting, we're going to start thinking more about making the center the whole business of the image. And so going back to a pose here, we would play through doing some different positions, using the hands in front of the face. We love to do that partial face obstruction thing. And like small movements make a big difference. Sometimes you'll just like change the way that your fingers are positioned, and that is going to add a lot to your image.
It's just some way you turn your face towards the light too.
And then things like this, like if my face is facing straight at Forrest, the way our light is, it's going to become really contrasty. And then if I turn my face just a little bit, we're getting more of the eyes here and getting like direct light on the face. And that depends, maybe you want that, maybe you don't. But good to just try through it. One other note is using this guy as another way to block the face without just using my hands. Okay. So this is another time when we'll talk about making tiny adjustments to make sure that you get a really exciting shot and that you cover kind of all of your bases as far as like, we really like for things to be even. So like making adjustments here. So if we play with this to cover the face, Forrest will kind of give me cues.
So tilt the cactus towards me, the front of the cactus, a little bit more. Great.
Cues like that help to make the image just a lot better. Details are really important here. Are my arms even?
They're pretty even, but I'd say maybe bring the cactus closer to you. Yeah, great. That looks good. And then let's do one where we lower the cactus so your eyes are peeking through it. Great. A little bit lower. And then tilt the cactus towards me. And then bring it up towards you a tiny bit. Too far? Great.
So running through that kind of stuff is going to give us a great range of options, and sometimes one of them will be really special. One other note, especially that we like to implement when we're shooting at home, is trying like a wild card option. So like maybe we go into it with a specific plan, like our plan here was to do the standing one, and we've tried through some options doing that. But it's good to just try to like think through the space and be like, is there anything else that I could do here that I'm not trying? Because it's like you're already set up, you've got everything, you might as well play around, you know, there's no way to lose. So here we might think about, what if we positioned me differently in like a less expected position? So should I scoot this back?
Yeah, I would scoot it back that way some. That looks pretty good.
So if I'm using this instead of as a chair, I think about how can I make my body similar to this line? And that's one thing that we play with a lot in our images, is using whatever's around you to play off of. Like, how do I make that shape? How do I make this relevant and like accentuate it as much as possible? Sometimes we'll do things where we like pretend that an edge is solid and like lean or pose on it in a way that makes it feel like flat spaces or three-dimensional.
Yeah, we really love striving with to be surrealistic with our minimal sets. So any way that we can play with the surreal of dimensional space, we really enjoy that.
And that's one thing to think about when you're posing around. Maybe it's not like color blocked walls, it could be the edge of a wall, but thinking about how do you engage with space. And so things like that, things like you can almost act like you're like pulling it, like you are one with this wall, like this is an edge. And then that adds that surrealistic fun, or as though you could like step on it or use your foot here, you know? Like, so think through playing with stuff like that. Don't be afraid to do something silly. And then here we can play with, what if I...
Let's scoot it this way a little bit more so that your feet aren't in the shadow. Okay,
like here.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, what if I'm at the same angle as the wall? So using this instead for my arms, putting my feet out and lifting.
Sorry, I think we need to scoot even more over now that I see where your feet land. Yeah, that looks good.
So there's a lot of little adjustments, obviously, that happen when we're trying to perfect the way that we are lining up with something. So if you put your feet out, lift up, it's important to articulate every pose like as much as possible. Like, go the extra mile, make it a little bit absurd, because I think that's going to show in the images. We like to do little things like hold my feet back here, make sure that that is as pronounced as possible.
Let's do one where you point your toes too. And point your face to the light. Or yeah, up is good. That was nice looking up. Yeah. Yeah, let's turn it away as well. Not that far. Back some. Great. And then flex your toes again. Awesome. Cool.
So that's some of the modeling that we kind of run through and try as we're shooting. And just making sure that we are kind of trying to look out for the unexpected. Sometimes what we set out to get won't be the image that ends up being our favorite. And so I think that's the importance of playing when you're shooting, especially when it's low pressure. If you're at your house, you're using yourself, you're using a friend or a roommate, then that's a great time to say, what the heck, let's just try everything. and sometimes get a really exciting result. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how we edit our images after we've shot them to make sure that we are getting the best look possible, and especially elevating it above that level of just like, oh, I shot this at my house, to make it feel like you've taken it to another level. So do we want to bring the chairs back maybe? Okay, so we use a program called Afterlight. Open it up here. So let me share, here we go. I'm going to show you some of the images that we really liked, and then go into how to edit the one that you choose. And then that's a good way for us to talk about how we select images and what we really end up thinking is special in the end. Okay, so here are some of our favorite images from the shoot that we did. This one we really liked because we got that really minimal composition. We got a great shape with the dress. The arms feel really straight and geometric. And then we capture a little bit of my eyes here, but it's not too much about the identity because we are getting the crossover on my face. So a lot is being obscured, but just capturing a little bit of the eyes can be such a nice point. Yeah,
and we love how her face is tilted towards the light, just enough that it's lighting her face in a pleasant way and it's not too much in the shadow.
Yeah. Okay, here's another image that we're really liking, which is where we're using the cactus to cover my face. Here we lose the identity altogether, but we get to engage with the cactus as that sort of point of focus that makes the image a little bit more complex. Here's one using the painting that we have up, partial face obstruction again, but keeping the eyes in for that little bit that pulls you in, because while it can be nice to obscure the face, it's good to try a lot of options, because sometimes a little bit of identity pulls people in, because when people see eyes, for instance, of other people, it really like grips them in a different way than seeing something that maybe has no humanity. And then same thing here. This is a fun one. No face being covered, but looking down really gives the identity a little bit less of the focus, and we focus more on how there's this movement throughout the image that starts with the painting and moves through my arms, connecting all those points. And then we have that diagonal running through the middle that kind of completes it.
This is also playing with the surrealism of space element, where Michelle is reaching backwards and engaging with this two-dimensional object in a way that people normally wouldn't.
Yeah, we like to add that little surrealist bit. And I am going to quickly show a few of the ones that we didn't choose and kind of talk about what we end up feeling like. No, I know. And so these are ones like where we're like trying something fun, but don't land on something that's going to feel surreal and exciting. And so there's a lot of finesse here about like, yeah, this is a fun image, but we're not at a perfect diagonal with a yellow. You know, we're going to end up catching the floor, which we think is a lot less exciting. And I think thinking through that kind of thing, or even, for instance, one that we didn't choose here, you know, it's like we're seeing the hand it doesn't feel perfectly aligned with the painting. And it also doesn't feel like it's at an angle that is going to create a nice line underneath the painting. And then the covering of the face maybe doesn't feel super intentional. And that's why you do these little micro movements, because if I had moved my hand just a little bit further in, you know, maybe we get that perfect moment where part of my face is covered, but we see my eyes, and it's like, that's a small movement from there. And then also what's happening with the dress, we're losing that perfect sort of cone shape that we had in the others. And that's something that a small, you know, knock my knee out a little bit more, and we would be getting that shape that we're excited about.
And a crucial element of our work is we'll put a lot of thought into producing a very stylized composition, set, wardrobe, props, all of that. But it isn't until we nail that exact pose that we know that we've made the image. And having like an incredibly sharp and dynamic and intentional looking pose is a crucial element of our work because it really dials it all together and brings it all home.
Yeah. Let me see. We're showing our recording here, and I'm not sure. She said just move the mouse.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. We're doing a little bit of troubleshooting on our. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of how we'll make our image selection, and I would say image selection is a huge part of making these types of images because little things that you do are going to make it feel more refined and be the difference between saying, oh, I was messing around shooting a little something at my house and then actually saying like, oh, here's an image I'm really excited about. So once you've done that selection process, we like to use Afterlight to edit. So today I'm going to edit this one. We ended up being really happy with this one. I think that the light on the face is strong, that the positioning is interesting, and is sort of utilizing all of those different elements.
We love Afterlight because it can do a lot of the things that a professional software editing could do on a computer, but it's already on the phone. So we can do the shoot on the phone, we can make the select on the phone, and we can do the edit on the phone without having to move the files from the phone to a computer and then back onto the phone to post onto Instagram or social media.
Yeah, and so for that ease, it's really great for posting to social, which is a lot of the reason that we will be doing shoots like this. Especially one note about staying creative at different times is just that it's important to be putting out work that shows your stylistic taste, that reinforces the ideas that you've been playing with. And a lot of times, images that we take that are like this, we will end up basing images that we take for ad photography and for client work off of images like this. Like taking this and saying, oh, well, we loved that position. Could we play with something like that on a pedestal in the studio or outside even?
Right, it's like we're sketching with the tool that is on hand.
Yeah.
And the best camera is the one that you have with you is like the classic saying, but you know, it's so true. The iPhone camera can take great pictures, and why not utilize that feature as a professional photographer?
Yeah, so, okay, I'm gonna show you how we edit this. So with all of our images, I start by cropping them. Because at this point, it's, you know, if it's not gonna be a usable crop on Instagram, then I feel like it's not really gonna work for us. So we pretty much do 8x10 everything now.
And even when we're shooting, we're thinking about the final crop.
Yeah, just knowing that there's a little bit extra on top. And for instance, in this image, you know, we thought maybe we would end up liking, we're seeing a little bit of this like plant that we have running down the side on the right, but you know, now I'm deciding I'm just gonna crop that out actually. And so we choose this crop button over here to the left. And then I select 8x10.
Which is the same thing as 4x5, it's the same ratio as what Instagram uses.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna pull it in a little bit over there, but I don't wanna lose that negative space or the yellow space to the right of the painting. So I select very carefully that amount, and then also, you know, with what we're working with, we're getting shadow over here on the left side, and that's just from a piece of furniture that we have there. So thinking about little details like that, like how can I elevate this? So I'm gonna pull that in a little bit, and then look what happens there is that yellow point hits right at the corner, which is an awesome tool to use when you have the chance. Having a line end in the corner is a great element for composition.
Yeah.
That just is super satisfying to the eye, and you end up with something that's going to be pleasing to look at.
Really strong compositions, once you get into the science of it, are basically all triangles. So in this image, you can tell we have a lot of triangles, and that's what really helps the eye move around in an image is points and triangles pointing towards things. And even Michelle's dress is functioning as a triangle in this image, even her elbow, even her hand, even the pedestal she's standing on, they're all variations of triangles. And the more you can utilize that as a compositional tool, the stronger your composition will be, in my opinion.
So then once you think through those compositional elements when you're cropping, we're going to move into editing the exposure, saturation, and then adjusting within our highlights, midtones, and shadows. I go ahead and boost the exposure on most of our images right off the bat. Sometimes you'll boost it a little bit more later once you see some other elements at play. But it's like in general, we want the image to feel as bright and full of light as possible. So this is the exposure, the brightness control. And so I'm gonna push that up, and I like to push it to where it's as far as it can go without overexposing the whites. We don't want it to look blown out, but it's like as much as you can do without blowing anything out. I'd say we can go to like probably this point right here.
And you'll see by boosting the exposure, it's also helping to fill in the darkness of the shadows and make those shadows feel less muddy, and the colors in the background feel more like pleasing color blocks.
And then we'll see more of that as we go through, because what we're really doing is wanting to make this image feel as crisp and bright and clear as possible. So once I have my brightness honed in, I'm going to select my saturation. Similar with saturation, I like to push it as far as we can go without blowing out any of the colors or making it feel fake. And I will say red is really a good measure for this. Red is the color that will look the most overblown the fastest. So if you do have red in your image, be careful of that. You don't want it to feel like a giant block of color with no texture or light in it. So here we can go a little bit, and as you'll see, I'm kind of like, I like to use the dial this way to sort of just eye it, you know, like try it up and down a little bit. I feel like this is as far as I can take this red without it starting to look a little bit insane. But as we adjust within our highlights, midtones, and shadows, we'll also have the chance to emphasize some of our colors without changing the saturation. So highlights are really important. So we're going to see, this is.
So what we're doing now is actually color grading. It's similar to what people do with film, which is where you adjust the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows, the actual color balance of each individually, which gives you a lot more control of the quality of the color.
So I'm not liking what's happening with this at all. So then I'm moving on to the blue section. And this is something that is really important on editing on an iPhone for me, is that I really don't like the whites to be too yellow. And I think that the cleaner the white can be, as close as you can get it to clear white without too much yellow in it, the better. So I find that I often end up adding a lot more blue into my whites, maybe sometimes a little past neutral and more into blue, but I think that it helps the other colors to pop more and gets rid of that like sort of light contamination that happens when you're using anything but like a color graded or like strobe.
Right, and it really helps feel like it's correctly color balanced.
Just turning that on and off there, like look at the difference between we're getting this kind of yellowy white right out of the phone, and then the difference when we've got a clear kind of a bluer white. Same thing here. I'll just like double check if I'm liking that. I'm not. So I'm just going to do the blue here. Okay, that feels good. So I can always come back in and tweak as I go. But I kind of just go off of my feeling of like what's feeling the best. Same with the midtones. I don't always change these. It really depends on the image. Like neither of those is doing anything I'm wanting to see. I do like to pull the yellow out of the shadows as well. I think it makes them look really muddy when they're too yellow. And so the cleaner we can make this, where we see a shadow happening on the white, but it's a clean looking shadow that you know, you can see the presence of light, but we're not getting the muddying that happens in the shadows when they're too yellow. So turning that on and off, you see the difference there. It's subtle, but it makes the image feel cleaner.
And one nice thing about being able to selectively change the shadows and the highlights and take the yellows out of them is that we're not taking too much yellow out of the midtone or something like that. And the reason why that's important is because skin tones do need a good bit of yellow and warm tones in them to feel alive. And if you neutralize the warm tones and skin too much, it starts to look kind of dead and sterile. So it's nice to have that control.
And on the midtones here, similarly, I'm pulling that kind of magenta color out of the shadows. And it is making the painting on the back greener, but I think it works here and is fun. So we're going to pull that out. And also it pulls that kind of color out of my skin that's making it feel a little misbalanced. And I will say, like, this is just a learning curve. Try different things, see what you think feels like it looks good, and it's going to be different every type of white.
And everybody sees color differently, so everyone's going to do it different. There's no right or wrong answer. It's about what looks the most pleasing to you.
And then we'll do the shadows here. I don't always choose to change the shadows, but sometimes it can be nice. Changing the color in your shadows is really going to change the visible darkness of your shadows, which is one thing to keep in mind. So like when I'm moving more red into this, it's going to look lighter, but that's not what we want here. You know, we want that contrast here. And then it's good to just sort of check what the other colors would do here. I think that we're not going to really need to adjust our shadows.
One thing to keep in mind about the color of your shadows is that like classic painters, for example, will add the complementary color into their shadows that they're adding into their highlights. And so will people who do color grading for film, like the classic Hollywood coloring is to have yellow in your highlights and blue in your shadows. And those are complementary colors. They're on opposite ends of the color spectrum, and it actually adds contrast in a way that the eye doesn't necessarily read. Just by looking at it, you wouldn't know that there's blue in the shadows, but once you see them together, it really makes for a really pleasing contrast, and it's contrast that's in the form of color contrast, and it also helps to kind of change the emotion of the edit. It actually changes how you perceive the image and like the psychology behind looking at it and what it makes you feel and think.
And so this is me. I'm going to look at the color temperature here. That's another thing that really changes the mood of an image, which is like how blue or yellow it is. Yellow definitely has a happier feel, but you can go overboard. So that is a good thing to keep in mind anytime you're editing. In this one, I feel like we're pretty balanced, but I think just a little bit more yellow can make it feel a little bit warmer and more fun maybe. So I'm going to add that in, and then at the end of every edit, I come back to exposure and our brightness and see if there's any more wiggle room on making it a bit brighter. Sometimes the answer is no, sometimes it's yes, but it's good to check because sometimes you'll finish editing an image, send it to yourself, or like draft it for Instagram, and then you feel like it looks dark. And so I think it's good to take one last glance over the brightness and just say, does this feel like it's as bright as it can be? And I will say, with this image, because we cleaned up the colors, it gives us a little extra room to brighten. We're able to pull it up just a bit more because once you clean up those other elements, you'll find that it can be pushed further without looking crazy now that you've honed in some different portions.
And it's important to see how much room you have to play, because the camera is taking an automatic setting image, and it's going to take the most middle ground exposure and the most neutral and unsaturated version automatically. So we're basically taking what the computer in the camera is deciding is the best exposure, and then boosting it to what we think is actually the best exposure.
And so finally, I'm just going to turn the whole edit on and off so that you can see the difference with the editing here. But that's a pretty big difference, where this is going to feel much more polished, finished, and there's no way that you would know that we're, shooting this in our house in the end. And we get a really fun, creative image that is great to share on social media, that we can use in our decks that we put together for clients, and use as inspiration for maybe more built out images that we would love to make. So I'm going to save that. Saved. And then we will just kind of wrap up with y'all. Oh, there's, I think, questions. Let's see. Oh, everyone is saying hi. Hi, everybody. Okay. What is your advice for someone who's camera shy, or if you're working with someone who's camera shy? That's a great question. So initially, when we started shooting together, we would use me as a model because we didn't have somebody else. And I definitely felt really awkward being in front of the camera. I felt very uncomfortable and just unsure of how to pose. But the best advice that I can give is to go and make a large mood board of images and think about what you like the models are doing. And so I went and did that. One artist I really love is Miranda Makaroff, and I looked at a lot of her images and used her posing as inspiration. this was helpful for a couple of reasons. One, that it made me realize that there's things you can do in images that are just objectively look great in images. And it's not about you as a person necessarily. It's more about how you're activating the space. So I think trying to remove yourself from it helps a lot to say, well, objectively, I know that this will be a great shape, or I know that this will use this part of the image. And as I focused on making bolder movements, putting my arms out, lifting my leg, bending over, doing all this different stuff, I felt emboldened to be able to pose in the images, because I felt like I was just like would go wild and just try a lot of different things. The other thing is I think the covering of the face helps a lot with that, because I think camera shyness comes from it being weird to look at your own face and have your identity in it. And I think that obscuring the face, you're still able to use a model, you're still able to use that positioning, but you take out that element of it being about you, which can make you feel a lot more comfortable.
I think that's great advice from the model's perspective, and from the director's perspective. I think it's great to try to get people to loosen up by getting them to laugh, to engage with them, and have some dialogue before you just go straight to taking pictures with them, and to also basically do a test run where you're not taking it very seriously, to kind of get everything loosened up and figure out what's working, and then come back to it and shoot again.
And one note about that, I think, is that if you're with a friend and they're feeling camera shy, I also think it's like about taking charge and sort of knowing what you're wanting in the image, because sometimes if you put a model in and then you just expect them to kind of do all of the work of like creating interesting shapes and making the composition exciting, that can be really overwhelming. And I think that's one thing people are kind of afraid of when being in photos, is them getting in and being like, I don't know what to do. So I think it's helpful for the photographer to know what they want.
That's true, yeah.
And so for me, I think it's helpful to come from the position of doing art direction and being the model, because I'm almost like separating myself from being the model and thinking more about the whole image. But I do think as the photographer, you can say, oh, okay, that's not working. Let's do this. Put your leg out this way, move your arm like this, cover your face this way. And that's just helping people to follow your cues instead of feeling like all of it's on them to make the image exciting.
And I think in general, for both the model and the director, it's really important to separate the image from the present and think about the final result, and think about it as a third object or a different subject than what's actually happening, because in the end, that's all that's going to be left. So it's really important to try to take kind of the ego out of it in the moment, and think about the final object, and think about it as a separate object.
Yeah. Okay, what's more important, equipment, a set, or editing? That's an interesting question, because they all are kind of equally important, which sounds sort of like I would actually say that the least important thing is maybe the equipment. I mean, does that sound crazy?
I think it depends on what you're using it for. When it comes to social media, I would say yes. When it comes to needing to shoot something that'll be on a billboard, I'd say it's different.
Yeah, I think in this type of shooting, the equipment is the least important, because what we're really trying to convey is an idea. And a lot of times when we think about what it is that people love about images or what engages them, I think it can be simple things like a great composition, a great color story, great bright light, a happy face, like a person in it who is radiant. So there's so many different things that attract people to the imagery. And I guess what I would say about the equipment is it's the least important, because you can't make a great image with the equipment part alone.
This is true. Also, when it comes to editing, I would say if you're doing film photography, you get a baked-in aesthetic that looks really great. But when you're doing digital, the editing is really important, because you're actually getting a pretty dull image that doesn't look that good until you push it really a lot farther. So it kind of depends on if you're shooting film or digital.
Yeah, I would say that I think that our overall set and like content would be number one of the importance. Number two, I would say, is the editing, because I do think that a bad edit can really squander a great image, and it's like knowing tools that you can utilize to like really cement the beauty of an image and make it super crisp and clean is going to make all the difference. And then equipment, I would put third.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But then I will say, like, like Forrest is saying, when we're shooting for a big ad campaign, when it's going to be on a billboard, you know, they all really have to work together in unison.
It also depends on what you're good at and what your skills are, and who you're collaborating, working with, and what their skills are. Like if you can work with a really talented editor, then you can export that part of the project to them. Or if you're working with a really great set builder, then you don't have to be as good at designing the set. But I think as many things that you can do yourself, the better, because that allows you to work freely and in all kinds of situations.
Also collaborating with friends, that's a great point, who have different interests than you, but maybe are interested in working together. It's a great way if you feel intimidated by any part to say, okay, well, you take on the editing and I'll do this, or you model, I'll model next time. Like, it's a fun way to play around and like sort of build your artistic voice. Okay. What's the most difficult project you've had to work on? Oh man. I'm trying to think. I mean, we had I think for me, one of the more difficult projects we worked on early on was a project we did for Carrabba's, actually, where this was a few years ago, but it was for their like new gift cards, and we were like spelling greetings and words out of food. And so that was one of our first times, I think, getting out of our comfort zone and figuring out how to put together a production that involved a lot of skills we didn't already have.
There's a lot of problem solving, and we had to lean a lot on other people to help bring it together, because like Michelle's saying, we're used to being able to kind of do all the different parts. So that took a lot of teamwork.
And they ended up coming up with a really great system to be able to do it, but it was like definitely a big learning curve. And I think that is one thing that's like both difficult and exciting about our job and doing ad photography in general, is you'll find yourself trying so many different things, and every day the work is different, every project is different, and so you have to be really creative with how you think about things and be ready to sort of move into other areas you didn't always see yourself in to be able to accomplish like more complicated projects. Do you have a project you thought was hard?
I was kind of thinking of this one project where we had to use glasses that had cameras built into them, and they shot a different format. They took circle pictures, and that was just challenging for me in particular because it was equipment that I wasn't used to. So there was a technical learning curve that kind of came first that I had to overcome in order to think about it creatively. So I think as much as possible, once you can become really comfortable with the equipment, and that comes second nature, then you can take that element out and just focus on the creative, that you're going to make better images and it's going to be more satisfying.
I also think the more that you work on exercising the part of your brain for like problem solving and for learning new things, the more equipped you feel every single time that you get a project, that you know you'll be able to figure it out and make a really great product. Like for instance, like this sort of live setup and like this way of showing shooting we like have never done before. And I think going through it with the team and like learning how to do it and learning how to share our ideas this way and kind of go through what we think of in a shoot is really enriching and interesting, and it just adds to all the different skills we feel like we have to be able to share more with others and to make images that are exciting. How would one know which camera best suits them? I'll let you go.
I think it goes back to kind of what I was just saying in the last question, which is the camera that is the most second nature, that is the easiest to kind of overcome the technical hurdles, whatever it is about the camera, if it's the interface or just that it's the first one that you started using. I think it's really important to stick with the system that is working for you and to not constantly be reinventing the wheel and going for like switching camera systems or trying to get the newest or most advanced. It's about finding that workhorse that helps you kind of get past the equipment, because the equipment is an essential part of capturing everything. But like we've been talking about, the creative is really the heart of the project. And as soon as you can let the equipment or the camera just be a means to an ends, the better. It's not the end result. Having the camera is not going to take really great pictures for you. So I think it's being fluid with the equipment that's the most important.
One other thing I think that's important to think about is when you look at artists you admire, to try to pull apart a little bit like what it is that makes you excited about their work. Because for us, for instance, a lot of people will ask us, what camera do you use? And it's an interesting question because like we switch cameras depending on the scenario. Like some things are shot on an iPhone. We use totally different cameras for ad jobs. Sometimes it has to be a much larger sensor size, and that all changes. And the thing that's consistent about our work is the style of it and the lighting that we choose and the way that our images are lit and edited. And so I think that you need to look at people, some people who do film photography, maybe the thing you like really is their camera, and then it's worth asking, what camera do you use? But I think it's to look at what is unifying their style of imagery that makes it worth looking at. And sometimes it really isn't the camera. And then maybe the question is, what's your lighting setup? Or like, you know, how do you come up with ideas?
Right.
Like what question is relevant to their style? And maybe it is about the camera, but sometimes there's other questions to think about.
And speaking back to like ease of use and familiarity, we chose one camera system, we shoot with Canons. But then when we're traveling, we shoot with a really small travel Canon with the same interface as our usual workhorse full frame camera. But then if we're shooting an ad job and we need a really, really big print quality, we also pick the Canon system if we can and just we rent one with a bigger sensor. So we're always trying to keep the interface the same so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel or relearn it.
It's also worth thinking about if there are any friends that you ever swap equipment with, or whatever, like what systems they use, because I think that was part of it. I used to shoot with Nikon, and then when we started working together a lot and I wanted to be able to use lenses and that kind of thing, I ended up switching over to Canon. So it's like also about practicality, like not only what you like best, but what's going to expand your resources as much as they can be. And then also there's the price point thing. Like if you only have a small budget for a camera, get the best like optics for that price point that you can, but don't let the idea of having to buy a very expensive DSLR hold you back from pursuing photography, because that's really, you know, there's amazing photographers now who shoot exclusively on an iPhone, and that's changed everything. I want to be a freelance photographer, but I don't have any clients yet. What's your advice? Well, we might have different advice. I think that that is a very big leap of trying to figure out how to move from having an interest in photography and making fun images to getting clients. For us, I think a really big part was making sure that we were just like putting work out constantly, even though it was work we were just making for ourselves and not for clients. And, you know, we were both doing assisting work. So I was a stylist assistant and Forrest was doing lighting, assisting on commercial photo shoots. And so that was like paying for our bills while we were using our free time to take images together that we were excited about, that we thought would be cool colors, that we just had a random idea for. And so making those types of images that were really just fundamentally our art, and then branding ourselves as Tropico and putting those images up, sharing them on our website, you know, putting them on Instagram. We did like some zines and like from a trip that we took, and did an art show and just kind of showing it to anybody who would look, basically. From that, we started to get inquiries from people about, you know, do you do commission shoots? And we were like, yeah, definitely. And then from there, I think that you have to be open to taking some lower paid jobs, actually quite a lot of them, just so that you can get your foot in the door and start to build more of a commercial portfolio. And when we were doing those for a lot of local clients, people with like really small budgets, but the freedom for us to make really great imagery and to use our style, which was really important for us. Then we moved into slowly over time getting more and more ad work until it was like national work, and you know, we have an agent now and all that kind of stuff. But it's just that movement of like showing people what you can do, and then you're gonna start getting interest. And I think that also creating a style that is specific to you, and that shows like what about your work is special is really important for building that following.
I 100% agree. I think instead of pursuing clients, pursue your style and really focus on developing that. And then I think clients will come to you seeking that style.
Especially with social media and stuff now, it's so easy to get your work out there to a broad audience. And I think the more you share that reinforces your artistic vision, the more people start to think of you that way. What's your favorite color combination to photograph? Oh man, that's kind of hard. I think it changes all the time, like sort of like the way the colors I like to wear and look at change all the time, like almost with your mood.
Yeah, I think for a long time it was pink and green.
Yellow? Oh, I was
It
gonna
was,
say
well,
pink and yellow
It was
a
pink and
long...
green, and then it was pink and yellow. I thought it was evolution.
Yeah, there's a lot of pink and yellow. We use a lot of yellow and blue. I would say yellow is probably the most consistent thing throughout our work. Is a color that I just really love to work with.
Yellow and blue and pink.
Yeah,
and
really the main ones.
A big part of it has to do with how well it photographs, because we use a lot of seamless paper to create color blocks in studio, and there are certain colors that just show texture more, they show wrinkles more, and there's other ones that seem to really look more filled and more full and more of a color block. And since that's what we're trying to do, I think that we lean towards what is more conducive. But I feel like we kind of shot so much yellow, blue, and pink that now we try to step away from that, and we're trying to play with the darker colors and colors outside of our comfort zone. So I think you're constantly wanting to reinvent what is normal for you so that you aren't just stuck in one colorway. Yeah, and I think that we like to expand, like Forrest is saying, but one good thing to keep in mind is it's great to have your constant colors that you do think photograph really well. Like we're saying, yellow, blue, and pink really work well for us. So then if we are doing a shoot where we're trying to expand and we're like, let's use like a dark green or something, then we would often still pair it with one of those brighter colors that we know is going to light super well. So it still brings that great, bright, sort of clean color quality to whatever we're making. Anything else? Cool. Well, you guys are great. Thank you for coming and for watching us do this shoot. We're really excited to be able to share it with you, and it's something we have not done this way before, so it's exciting to try. Definitely feel free to let us know if you have any more questions. We are Tropico Photo, and you can find us on Instagram at Tropico Photo, or our website is just tropicophoto.com. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions, and thanks for following along. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, everybody stay safe out there, and we're excited to see what you make.
Bye, all.
La idea es como algo muy frágil.
Se me fue la hebra.
I'm going to show you some examples. This is what we've got behind me.
¿Qué más preguntas tengo por aquí? ¿Cómo descubriste que los nubes